Cool. Well, we are here today with Esther Kim, our program manager for the Angelus Worship Initiative, and also our co-host today, and John Sutton, Dr. John Sutton, who is Director of Choral Activities at Azusa Pacific University here, also directs the Angelus Worship Chorale. And John, you have conducted at the Hollywood Bowl and the Disney Concert Hall downtown LA. You direct hundreds of individuals each and every week, both students, ministry, professionally, and you've also been a significant contributor to our worship studies program here at Azusa Pacific. So thank you for being our guest and just taking some time to have a conversation with us today.
Well, thank you, Stephen and Esther. It's great to be with you both today and to just talk about worship and music and people and God. I mean, those are all my favorite things just wrapped up into one. And so it's just great to be with you and to share some time.
Yeah. So we have some questions we'd love to just pick your brain on. One of them has to do with this current environment that we're in right now and how so much has changed over the past few weeks. And so just from a personal perspective, I'm curious for you, what keeps you fueled? What keeps you sort of propelling forward through a time like this? Are there tools of thought, inspiring things in your life, artistically or otherwise?
Yeah, sure. Well, I feel like one of the things is food. I'm on the CV19 diet where I'm trying to gain 19 pounds during this pandemic. And so I'm not sure I'm trying, it just seems to be happening. But no, in a serious kind of way, it's really interesting. You articulated some of the things that keep me busy in a normal kind of environment. And man, I live for the day. I live for the day when I can have a day where I don't have to leave the house, where I don't have to get in my car and drive. Man, that is a vacation day for me. Even if I'm working here at the house, just to not have to leave. So after, about a month and a half of this now, I'm ready to drive someplace, just to go take a drive, just to get out of the house. So it's been interesting to sort of self-assess about that very question. And for now, what has kept me motivated has been the things right in front of me, the things that are right at my hands that I need to do today, a class that I need to teach, a class that I need to transfer online. I come from a heritage of farmers, and so we like to work, because if we don't work, we don't eat. And so just jumping into the work that was at hand, and not to try to spiritualize everything, but I really do believe that God calls us to do what's at hand, what's in front of us. And it's, sometimes we're praying to love the world, and we're praying for people across the land, and we should. But we haven't even met our neighbors. That doesn't make sense to me, because they are at hand. We can actually affect and take over. My mom, when our neighbors were sick, she took them custard. I don't know if they like custard enough, but she took it to them, and she knew what was going on in their lives. She did the ministry at hand, and I think that's something also that I really learned in college, because like Azusa Pacific University and probably almost every institution of higher learning, there's opportunities to get involved as a student. And I remember some of the students that I was in college with said, I'd love to do that, and they just talked about their ministry that was out there, when they graduated, and they talked about it, they prayed about it, but they didn't do much in college. And there's others of us that got in and just joined the Fatherless Boy program, the Big Brothers, I think, and we did street ministry, and we just did it. And sort of interesting, those that were talking about it, they're still talking about it. They still haven't done anything. So I just think there's something about doing the ministry at hand. So what's really kept me motivated is doing what I have to do today, and do it to the best of my might, with all of my strength, with all of my power, to do it as unto the Lord, even if I'm only just eating or drinking, whatever thou doest, do as unto the Lord. So that's my first answer. The second answer has been, as I've ruminated on this different kind of time and a different kind of summer, I was supposed to be in Argentina with a choir. My wife and I had some travel plans, and all of that's been canceled. And so it's this gift I feel that's come to me from God, the world, circumstances. But ultimately for me, I always think about God. And so I've just been making a list of the things, the books I want to go back to, some score study, some piano work, you know, so that has also motivated me, that I can hardly wait. I've got some articles to write, as you know, and I'm very excited. So the present and the future have both been highly motivating to me during this time, and for in many ways different reasons. One is to trying to serve best and to be an encouragement to students and to people in my life, that the whole world has been upended. We've never experienced like anything like this. I haven't. And then I guess the other sense is serving and stewarding my own life in some of this extra time that I have to do some things that I've not been thinking about but haven't done. So those are the two things that have really kept me moving.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. It's really insightful and helpful. And I kind of wanted to shift into this idea of virtual ensembles. And as you are a Director of Choral Activities at Azusa Pacific University, and you've worked with so many different choirs, I just wanted to get your insight. What do you think about the virtual ensemble? You know, can the virtual choir help us to experience deeper connection?
Okay. I'm excited about the virtual choir. I'm not sure why, but I am.
Okay.
And I think it's because it's new. And I think in some ways it places to be a part of a virtual choir, you have to know your part, your line that you're going to upload and share, and it's going to become part of the other people that are part of this virtual choir, this other experience. And so you can't hide in the live setting. And you've both been in choir. Stephen, you're a conductor. Dr. Martin, you're a conductor as well. And so you know that people can sort of pull back and sort of be there and sort of sing, but not really contribute much and not make many mistakes. And so this sort of pulls back the veil of that and makes you step forward through technology into this other kind of experience. So I'm excited about that. I've been in touch with some of my colleagues, and they're doing some Zoom virtual sectionals where maybe just the bases are meeting, and they're working, they're being coached on a section, and then within 48 hours they have to record themselves on that, send it in, and there's some wonderful grad students who are compiling all of those and putting those together. So then we hear all of the bases singing those 8 measures or those 2 pages of the piece. So I think the accountability factor is exciting, and then I think the finished product is quite lovely as well. I was just doing some surveying on YouTube and came across some of these that are fairly recent, not the Eric Whitaker, sort of the old one that's incredible and amazing, but it's something much more fresh and much more new. And I thought that's really nice. And I liked how I could see all of their faces on the screen and they move around, and you know, I liked it a lot. Will it replace the traditional choral experience? Not a chance, not a chance. You know, it's another kind of experience. And so that's what I'm excited about. I'm not excited, and I don't have any illusions that this will replace what we do when we're together live. It's a whole nother thing. But I do think there's some real benefits to it, and I think the outcomes are really exciting as well. They're different. And so to try to compare or to try to say we'll never have choirs again or large choirs, I think it's really short-sighted. But I'm excited about it, and I'm excited to see how the virtual choir could be a resource for the live choir experience, even in rehearsals. and being able to take a performance from the very same group and to modify it and to digitize it, sorry, in another way that it has another life and another DNA. That's fantastic.
So related to that, I'm thinking about this question of isolation.
Yeah.
And I was listening to someone this morning say, what a gift this is, because I've now been given an opportunity to read great books from great thinkers. And as you mentioned a minute ago, study some of the great composers and their music and get more deeply involved in that. Maybe even do some writing, poetry, music, prose, whatever it might be. So how important do you think it is for us to stay connected, but also we're in this interesting kind of tension now between this is a real chance to dig more deeply into our philosophical, musical, theological foundations?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think for some people, this is a great gift. And for others, it's a great torture. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely unbearable. Depending upon the kind of personality you are. I've got some friends and they cannot stay quarantined. They have to get out. And, we look at the guidance from our state and county, as well as federal medical people. And I understand quarantine a certain kind of way, except for necessities, and others, they're out every day. And so I think they're the kind of person, I've not judged them. I've just thought, oh, they're one, they've got to be out. They've got to be moving. It's like a caged dog. It has to get out and run. And there's others who are more reflective. I'm thinking of those who would have given their life to go and become nuns and monks, who are more at peace with being set apart, being isolated, being alone time. And my hand is up. I'm one of those people. I like being alone. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's a great gift. I do think, again, thinking about that this is not the pandemic, but God can use everything for his purposes. No, there's no question of that. And so I do think this is a gift for us to be in touch with ourselves and with God, and then maybe through electronic means and online means with other people. But I remember Dr. Martin, when I was at Taizé, and Esther, I had the incredible privilege and joy of going to Taizé for about a week. And I had gone there just to, and for our listeners and watchers, Taizé is a place in France. It's a worshiping community that started in the 40s, and it's interdenominational. It's not Catholic or Protestant, it's both. And so it's just a unique place, and a lot of worship songs, and it certainly impacted worship here in the West in some significant ways from my perspective. So I wanted to go to the source. So I was there for a week, and all I did was basically ask people, why are you here? I just would get to know people, or just, strike up a conversation, because the week I was there, I think there's about 45,000 people there, and only 25 from the United States. Out of all those thousands of people, only 25 from the US, others were from other parts of the world, and most were between 19 and 25. So I was a much older person. So just chatting and asking where they're from and what brought you here. And I'll never forget some of these conversations I had that were significant and are significant to me, instructing me on worship and some of this topic that we're mentioning right now. So in Taizé worship, one of the significant moments that happens every time you pray, which is 3 times a day, is 15 minutes of silence, absolute silence. And so I began to ask people what that was like for them. And I'll never forget this one answer from a Canadian girl, and she looked me in the eye and she says, "I can hardly bear it." And I said, "How come? That sounds hard." She says, "Because I have to be with myself." And it really struck me that all of the music, conversation, everything goes away, even though we're in this large tabernacle of, I don't know, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 people. But it forced her to be alone with her thoughts, to be alone with her feelings, to be alone with her body, just to be alone and to be by herself and to be with herself. And for her, she found that to be very challenging, very difficult. And so I think for those kinds of people, for whatever reason, that struggle to be alone, to be with themselves, I think this is very, very challenging and torturous. And of course, we all have the, I can go, when I leave you, and go out to the yard and garden and pick some of the herbs and mix them with some salad and roast some potatoes and see an online cooking course. And I can do all of that. And, as I'm reading some poetry from Walt Whitman, or I can sit on my ass and watch Netflix for 18 hours and binge watch a whole season of you name the favorite thing. We all have some choices to make, and in terms of how we're going to steward ourselves, our family, our friends through this time. So for me, it's a gift, and I'm really grateful for it. Not only the time that I've had, I think my wife and I have had a lot of conversations, we typically do, but just about this and what it means, and that we get to work at home together now, and the joy that that's been for us. So I think it's an interesting thing, but I think the first opportunity is an opportunity to connect with yourself and to see, are you comfortable with who you are and how you are and how you spend your time? I mean, I just think it's that, but for some people, that's really a difficult challenge.
Yeah. It's so fascinating that you mentioned the monastic life. Thinking back to the early desert fathers like St. Anthony and Benedict and some of these others, and the pattern that began to repeat itself where they individually would go out into the desert, that connection with themselves that you were just mentioning, and connection with God. What is it? Athlete Dei. We can become athletes of God by these certain practices that they would search for by themselves. And then inevitably, they would be followed by other people, and a community would form around these formative practices. And then the community became self-sustaining. And we now see modern examples of that in Teze and Iona and some of these other, where if you go there, you're contributing, you're helping with the cleaning, the cooking,
right.
And then there are these 15-minute, or 30-minute or gatherings that are at a regular time space throughout the day where the community gathers. And even as isolated as we can be, as introverted as we can be, myself included, we need these moments of community. And now we're seeing that play out just in different ways, I think.
Yeah, you made me think about a Lenten journey that I was having through reading a few years ago. And in it, the author was talking about that we all want to have the life of Jesus. We all want to model Jesus' life publicly. And he made a real difference about that, that we all want to have the life that Jesus had publicly. And what was Jesus' public life? Well, healing the sick and having that perfect word of wisdom to the lady caught in adultery, and to the tax collector, mean man, and to just that right amount of righteous anger to chase the money collectors out of the temple. And so he says that's the kind of life we all want. But none of us want to do what Jesus did privately. And he talked about the fasting, the prayer, and the distancing of himself from others. In a sense, the self-quarantining of Jesus to be alone. And he said, none of us want to do that. And then he said this, but that's what Jesus did alone was what allowed Jesus to have his public life. They're connected. And I don't know, to me, it really struck me in terms of how important alone time is. And Jesus was very adamant about this. I mean, he does something that not us, there's no pastor living today that I've ever met that would do what Jesus did. And what's that? He sent the crowds away. I've never met a pastor who would even consider doing that. But Jesus did. and he knew something. Again, Jesus is this outlier that resisted the world, the temptations of the world, the temptations to build something big and, you know, with the church, the property and bank accounts and all that. So.
Wow. That was very deep. Thank you for sharing that. As you were talking about kind of the role of the pastor or the worship pastor, and as we're kind of talking about church and just how things have shifted so much because of the pandemic, any insight that you can provide us today, how you think that the role of the worship pastor might change as we think about like how we're navigating the times right now, but also when we think about reopening. Any insight?
Yeah. Well, I'll just say, this won't surprise you guys because we've chatted about this many times. It's one of my soapboxes. So here we go. I hope it changes. I want it to change.
Nice.
Because I think, and I'm talking from a long history of worship leading personally and growing up in the church, and as a current worship leader and someone who worships as well as leads occasionally still. So I'm talking about myself. I think, you know, the model that we've received has been a very Sunday oriented model. And it's been a very Sunday morning service model in terms of what happens. And so I think most of us, and that's how I'd like to phrase that, most of us, me, as that are worship leaders, have been 95 to 99 to 150% of our time has gone into what happens on Sunday morning. And I've not done the math, but some smart person could. We spend an hour, maybe if we're really generous, 2 hours, somewhere in the middle of that, probably an hour 15, hour and a half. What percentage of that is the time on a week? And we put all of our leadership, all of our talent, all of our energy, all of our thought into that. And not that we shouldn't, but I just really have a hard time reconciling that that's all we basically do, and that we're not thinking about what's the worship happening on Sunday afternoon, Monday at 3 o'clock, Tuesday at 7 p.m. What's the worship through the entire life of the body that we are supposed to not be leading in worship, but leading to become worshipers and to engage with the Father on their own, so that when we come back on Sundays, it is truly the celebration of the worship that Esther, you've been doing, that Stephen, you've had, that I've had, and we come and we share this gift like a great potluck dinner. We all know what that's like, and we bring our favorite grandmother's recipe, and we bring the thing that we're good at, and we come and we share and we celebrate, and it's rich and it's diverse. And so I just am so tired, and I don't think I'm an old fuddy-duddy at this point in this area. Other areas, I'm sure, but I'm not longing for the good old days. I'm longing for something new and fresh, and it just seems tired. It's the same old thing with some different songs, and I'm really ready for something new that has a much larger arc to its viewpoint and its perspective. And it's not just so Sunday centric, and not even Sunday centric. It's just Sunday centric for like 95 minutes. That's it. I just think we should be having a much greater impact on the life of the church. I mean, we have greater expectations for our youth leaders, for our pastors, for our Christian ministries staff, that we're affecting the lives, not just entertaining them for, I don't know, 95 minutes, like I said. So I'm hopeful that this is getting us out of some ruts, and that we will never return to them in the same way. We'll maybe return to them. There are some tracks that we're comfortable in, but that will be fundamentally different because of this experience that we've been forced to have, that maybe we've been forced to think differently. And that's really all that is. It's about our thinking that has caused us to have a larger view, a large consideration. You know what, I can't remember half this stuff, but you know, it's like the person that gives someone a fish, and then the other one that teaches them how to fish. You know, I think the current model that we're in is giving people, you know, little worship experiences every week, if they come. And I think we need to be teaching them how to become a worshiper. And again, oh my gosh, that's such a huge question, because Stephen, as we're just talking about, some people are just relishing in this time away to read and think, and others are going crazy. You know, the spectrum of the worshiper in our churches that's sitting in front of us. What a wonderful task we have to reach out to the many styles, genres, perspectives, and of how people worship, and what their primary worship language would be, and to try to hit all of that and to teach them into that. So I'm excited about what this is doing. I think it's challenging, but again, I'm one of those people, I like that. I like to have to think differently and see if I can, I like to jump in the deep into the pool and see if I can swim.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. It's caused me to really start thinking about what is the role of the church when we are allowed to be in the same space together again, physical space.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What does our not only internal picture look like in those spaces, but then how we're reaching beyond? In our worship leadership formation course this semester, we took a journey through the Old Testament, as we always do. And, you know, you think about the Israelites being in persecution and slavery. And then I wish I could have been there on the other side of the Red Sea when they erupted into song and Miriam is leading them in singing. What that must have been like, the song, I mean, just this immense sense of gratitude that, I mean, you just escaped with your lives. You just escaped with your lives. And, you know, when this pandemic is over, because we will get through this, what is that moment going to feel like? Or series of moments we might see. What is that going to be? And then what kind of gratitude can we shepherd in ourselves, in our communities, as a result of this new perspective it's given us?
Yeah, Stephen, Dr. Martin, well said. I get excited hearing you describe that, and it makes me anticipate that. I do think there's at least for me in the circle that I'm walking in, there is this great sense of gratefulness and of thankfulness. Again, not for what we're going through, but how we're finding God in the midst of this, and how God is being revealed. God is certainly at work, and that to me is so exciting to see God at work in and through me and my life in this moment, and through the church, and I just have great hopes and expectations for what the church will be on the other side of this, because my goodness, I think we'd all say if we go back to the same, we really missed it. We didn't learn and embrace the opportunities that God is giving us to have to use technology more. Again, maybe for our older constituents, that like me, that you know, my first thing isn't to go to the computer to chat with people. I want to text them probably or phone them, or go to a live service. And I was thinking about this, I don't know, just ruminating, you know, sort of brainstorm, but just wondering if this is a prelude for some time down the road, when the church is really under persecution, where this will be a haven for us, you know, a place of refuge to find a community online. And again, I don't think permanently, but for a period of time when you have to do this in this kind of way. God is certainly able to conquer the limitations of technology, and the Holy Spirit to use this. So I don't know, I'm sort of on the excited side to see what happens, but I do hope that we come back to our corporate gatherings of worship fundamentally changed, if not just a little bit.
And I'm also curious to get your perspective on this, because at the same time that we're looking forward to celebration and the coming through of this crisis, how do we, as people in ministry, people who in whatever way, shape, or form, have a group that we're looking after. And how do we grieve alongside those who are losing family members and provide some sense of resource or support, or prayer is such a deep part of our faith, and journeying along with those who are grieving. What has your experience been in times of crisis, and just helping people journey through their own lament?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it made me immediately think of two contrasts. This is the period of time in my wife's family's life where there's lots of birthdays, like, within a span of 4 weeks, there's 7 birthdays. I mean, boom, 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 boom. And so with her family being in Argentina, we've been having Zoom parties, and so we're all there together, and that can be about 12 to 25, and we sing terribly a rendition of Happy Birthday in Spanish. What makes it terrible is not the singing or the intent, but just the distance and the Zoom and all this. But it's been joy filled, and that's been a real delight. That's on one side. The other side now is being in contact with my neighbor across the street, and through some emails and us going out to our respective mailboxes at the same time and getting the mail and saying hello from a long distance, but connecting. And his sister passed away just during this most recent time. And so they could only go to the funeral in their car, and they couldn't get out of their car. And so here they are sitting in their car as their loved one is over there and lowered into the ground. And, it was just so distant. And just hearing him describe it was heartbreaking. Sharing it with you now, I feel the emotions again, how sad that was. And the hugs that are needed to feel the strength of someone else that's supporting you and praying with you. And just the physical act of putting a hand on that casket just to be close and to say a final good, and it's not that we can't do that in other ways, but these are symbols. Yeah. And they're symbolic, and we as worship pastors and as liturgical academics, we know the power of symbols, that they represent something much bigger. And when we can't embrace those symbols, or when we're denied the symbols, or the symbols have changed, and we don't know what the new symbols are, we sort of feel a break there. The bridge to cross over has been removed, and it's sad. So I think for what I've been doing, I've had some wonderful leadership partners at Lake Avenue. And so for our choir, which is a large group, it's about 130, 140 in terms of people that are actively participating, and that we are part of that choir community and family. We've divided that choir up into small groups. And so I have a group that I'm keeping track of, and it's really interesting. I want to be very honest and transparent, and you'll see I'm not that nice of a person. So I wanted to write them on Thursday because that's our choir night. So okay, here we go on Thursday. So you write this perfunctory email that doesn't sound as bad as it probably feels, because try to encourage them, but you're doing it because you've been asked to. And so now I know that today's Wednesday, and this is now like 4 weeks later. I can hardly wait till tomorrow, because I get to connect with these people that they're emailing back, and we're connecting, we're sharing prayer requests, and they're this little family that I'm shepherding, and it's a whole, what a difference a month makes in my heart and in my attitude. But it's been really interesting as I've taken those emails and wrote a general one, for sure, a thought for the day, but then personalize it. And the longer we go, the more personal they become, because they're sharing prayer requests. So I'm asking, how is your mom doing? Or, man, I was sorry to hear that your father passed away back in January. And what's really interesting, they're sharing some things that had occurred before this that they didn't share, that nobody knew. Yeah. And now they're in this format, they're sharing. So that to me is interesting. And I think it's, again, instructive, again, Esther and Stephen, that, again, some of us are very comfortable in certain modes of communication and certain environments, and others of us aren't. And so this is a very, very private person who we get along and stuff, but I don't really know them and they don't really know me, but he sings, I conduct. And, but in this environment, over this time, he shared that with me. And so yeah, I just think that's amazing how God can use these moments in time. But same thing with the Angelus Chorale. Have made Tuesdays our rehearsal night. And so I've been sending them out a weekly personal rehearsal plan for them to work on Tuesdays. And they have 3 options: 15 minutes, 30 to 40, and 60 to 90. So they can choose the option that fits for them. And then we typically have a break every rehearsal at 9:10 at UCLA every Tuesday night. So at 9:10, we have a Zoom, and we call it the happy hour. We call it in the rehearsal the happy hour, which is funny because there's not much happiness to it, and it's not an hour, it's only 10 minutes. But we've been calling it that. And, you know, I have 12 people. I had 12 people last night. A couple of weeks ago, I had 35. You know, it's just sort of whoever can, and we just are together. For the university choir at APU, I had them. I created a blog that they could each see each other's responses, and I asked them 5 questions, and they had to choose one from that list of 5, or number 6 was say anything you want, talk about anything. And so it's been really interesting to see. Some of the questions were, how has not singing changed your view about what it means to sing? You know, how has it affected you spiritually, emotionally, and just different things that I was interested in. So it's been wonderful to get those students' feedback. And the other thing I did was just to start a list that they could contribute to of, if we were to have a celebration concert celebrating the reopening of life as we would like to know it, if people being together and singing together and making music and all of that, what would be the songs that you would like to sing? And so they've been suggesting choral repertoire with YouTube videos, with here you can buy it here, or it's a manuscript that you have to get permission from the composer. But they've just been exploding with ideas of things that they would like to sing when we come back. So I'm going to let some of those ideas sprinkle my repertoire through the entire year. Or if we do have a concert that would be like that, that would be the cornerstone repertoire that we would have to express what they suggested.
Wow, that's exciting. As we're talking about kind of your work within the church as a worship pastor, and you know, some of our audiences, or our listening audience here, maybe the young aspiring worship leader, young artists, and at Angelus Worship Initiative, you know, we're trying to partner with churches to empower them. You know, and so I wonder if you could share just a couple things here. If you have any moments when you've enjoyed the worship design process, like what was that like for you? What aspects do you enjoy the most about that worship design process?
Sure. Well, I've been planning worship and leading worship for a long time, and on a regular full-time basis for probably 30, 40 years. You know, I don't do that full-time anymore. I'm more of a part-time person at this point. Full-time thinker, part-time leader. But I think the thing that would stick out in my mind is I loved it when I really felt in partnership with the pastor. And, you know, I served churches of varying sizes, large and medium size, and small, I guess, maybe. But, you know, I didn't always feel that with the pastor. And the places that I did, what a joy that was, to really feel like the worship and the word were going hand in hand. And man, what a powerful, powerful morning and time of worship we could have. But it was through that relationship with the pastor, who had a lot of trust in me, and that we felt this was a partnership. And so for me, as I grew older, it was really learning to not find the right job. It was really learning to find the right pastor.
Wow.
And learning to be who, you know, and I'm a certain kind of guy with certain kind of strengths and weaknesses and likes and dislikes. So I'm not the right worship leader for every pastor, I don't think. Could I do a job? Sure, I could make that happen. But in terms of that relationship where you're really right in step with each other and not always agreeing. Now, I'm not saying that at all, but you're in step with each other and you have each other's back and you have each other's heart and you walk together. So that's been the greatest joy. And I have to say too, the greatest joys I've had are the churches that I've been at the longest. You know, sometimes you sort of have your little thing that you do, and it's in a suitcase about that big, and you go and you do it, and then you don't know what else to do, and so it's time to go because you've exhausted all your resources. And the places that I've served the longest are the places I've had the greatest impact, and the places that have meant the most to me, because again, I think really great worship leading comes out of relationship, where the leader trusts the congregation to follow and the congregation trusts the leader to lead well. And so again, these are big comments that probably don't mean much to anybody, but I'm not telling you anything specific, except maybe to be looking for a pastor rather than for a church. And that there's a huge element in good worship leading, and that's a whole nother topic right there. But there's a huge element of trust that allows that to happen. You've got to be a good leader, but they have to be good followers too. And you know, we live in a very interesting climate and time where I think those relationships really need to be nurtured. So
yeah, and you know, in a way that's something that you can't really teach or learn in a classroom setting. You know, those just kind of happened in your experiences as you're kind of navigating through your job or your role as a worship leader. So along those lines, you know, what are some other things that you learned through experiencing your times in different churches that no course has prepared you for?
Oh. How much time do we have?
Oh, well, maybe just one or two.
Well, those are incredible things to reflect on. Well, briefly, I remember when I started my first job, I had my bachelor's degree in church music and worship, and with a double major in Bible Lit. So I felt fairly loaded and ready. And I remember going to my first church, and I was their first minister of music that was full time, that was, you know, professional and trained and all that. And so just, I really thought I knew it. I really thought I knew what I was doing. And of course, you know, by month 3, it's clearly evident that I can do some of this stuff, but the people skills, working with people, oh my Lord, that's so much. It's not the music. I've never found the music hard. That's been joyous and fun and easy. But working with people and really looking past the words they're saying and seeing them, looking past how they're treating you and seeing them. I mean, just looking deeper, and I pray to have the eyes of Christ and to have spiritual ears every day. And so to be able to look deeper than just they won't do this or they won't volunteer to do that, you know, all those things that we sometimes get caught up in. The other thing that I have learned, and you know, maybe it's something very personal that doesn't translate well to anybody else, but I have learned that I am really gifted as a worship leader. And that sounds extremely arrogant, and it just, as I say that, I just hate how that sounds. But I never wanted to acknowledge that I had some giftings. I just, in fact, and I sort of wanted to run away from worship leading. And at a significant moment in my life, I told everybody I could. I told everybody that I knew that I was retiring from church music ministry. I wasn't going to do it anymore. I was going to do something else. And I had job offers, really good job offers with a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. But I just knew that wasn't the path for me. And that was part of the transition that brought me to APU. but even when in the midst of telling people that, it was there was a time where Lake Avenue Church called and they said, could you be an interim for us and do this? And I thought, oh man, I'm retiring from this. And then, within a few months, it's, well, could you be the person, and could you do this? And I was uncomfortable with it. And I am that worship leader that is like Jeremiah, who said, Lord, this is really hard for me. I've not just run to be a worship leader. I'm just not that kind of person. I have too much self-doubt. I just don't, all this stuff of insecurity and of just, there's so many other people that could do this. And I think, those of us who are worship leaders, we all know keenly well how the shortcomings of our lives. And so I've had some significant experiences that were so personal and so unique that God clearly spoke to me saying, I've chosen you for this, and you are doing this. I am having you do this because it pleases me. And you might not be, this or that, but I want you to do this. It pleases me when you lead others to my presence. And so I've had to reluctantly kind of accept that for whatever reason, God has called me to be a worship leader. And it's an uncomfortable gift for me. And I'll say one thing sort of that goes back to your other question as well. It will tie this up, I think, is one of the greatest experiences I had. Again, I was at a church for a significant amount of time, almost 10 years. And they trusted me so much, and I trusted them so much, that I could start a song, get a song going, and then I would just walk down and I would stand in the congregation and sing with them. And if we needed some direction, I could give it from there to the musicians, or if we needed to move on, I'd go back up. But it was just so the people worshiping without me being up front, which was the uncomfortable part for me. And I'm one of those guys, I don't like having my face up on that screen. That's the last thing that people need to see is me. I mean, I wish there's a picture of Jesus or something, or a verse, but I'm uncomfortable with that stuff, because it's I mean, we're there for God and God alone. And so when or the pastors or anyone who's up there, we're these giant, like, super-sized pictures. It just, I don't know, it just isn't me. And it's hard for me. I would prefer never to have my face up there. And when Lake Avenue first did that, I asked them, please do not put my face up there. It irritates me.
Did they accommodate?
They did for a while. And then, I think, that's where maybe I gave in, or the pressure of the cultural pressure. And that's a whole thing we could talk about. The cultural pressure of to see the leadership well, and to connect with the emotions on the face because I mean, a lot of our churches, Lake Avenue is one, but there's many others in the LA area and around the world. The places are so big that if you're up in the balcony, you see that there is a person there, but you don't see their lips move. You don't really see their eyes. You can't see the emotion. So I do understand how that does work, and it does, and that makes sense to me in terms. So it becomes a communication issue rather than a vanity issue, I guess.
Yeah, that's so true. People want to be able to connect with you on the individual level, which allows, there's a kind of story being told, it seems, in that engagement. So, well, John, thank you so much just for taking the time. It's finals week here at APU, so we're all in the midst of a lot of moving pieces, but thank you for taking some time to chat. I have one last question for you. If you have an anecdote or a quote or something that has been helpful for you recently, I don't know if you'd be willing to share that here with us today.
Sure. Well, first, let me just say to Esther and to you, Stephen, thank you for the invitation to come and be with you. And you both know how much I love just to come and talk with you guys, whether it's in a formal way like this, or just in our offices, or in the quad, just to talk about these issues that are in all of our hearts. And And all I know today is what I've experienced, and I don't know that I know much beyond that. I just know what I've experienced and how it's spoken to me.
Mm.
Two things that have spoken to me. I'll share with you two quotes. One is from Leonard Bernstein. And he said, if the spirit's not free, the baton won't be free.
Mm.
The baton can't be free if the spirit's not free. And so he linked this aspect of his spirit to what he does. And I think there's a good truth in there for us, that for us as worship leaders, if our spirits aren't free, our leading isn't going to be free. It's going to have some constrictions or some boundaries that God would like to unshackle us from.
Mm.
So I just love that quote, and that was from Leonard Bernstein. The second quote, I don't recall the person, because it's a new quote in my life. Now, I was telling you about it a little earlier, but in this time period that we're all trying to lead, and we're trying to lead in a new environment, in new ways, and we're not following any trail or path. We're blazing a new trail for our churches, our worship teams, our congregations. It's just incredible what we're being asked to do right now. So I think we're all examining our leadership in a different context, in a different genre and communication process. So here's the quote: that people will forgive you if you're not the leader you should be, but they'll be less forgiving if you're not the leader you claim to be.
Wow.
So I think those are two good words of wisdom for my life today. And I think people in my life, I've seen that to be true, that they're fairly forgiving when I make the mistake of, the head, but they know it's not a mistake of the heart. But people are less forgiving when I've said I'm this and then I'm nothing like that. Then they're less forgiving that because I claim to be something that I wasn't.
Wow, those are really great words of wisdom. Thank you for sharing those quotes, and just thank you again for this time that you were able to be with us. There were so many topics that came up that I feel like deserve another hour of its own. So hopefully we can have some of those conversations in the future with you again. Yeah, so that's it for us today. Thank you for those of you who have joined us and watched this video with us. If you guys enjoyed it, please like, subscribe. There's a link to check out our website for announcements on our Worship Arts Lab, which is our summer program happening online. It's a stay-at-home edition. So it'll be fun, interactive. So if you want to join us, the details are on our website. So thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Martin and Dr. Sutton. We'll see you guys next week.